The village of Blackwood had long been shrouded in darkness. Its narrow streets, once bustling, now lay empty at nightfall. And the old church of St. Alden stood as a grim sentinel in the center of the town. A place of worship in its prime, it had become a symbol of fear and dread. For as long as anyone could remember, no one had dared to enter St. Alden's after dusk. A curse, they said, lingered in its walls, a curse that had claimed many lives. Tom, a young traveler unfamiliar with the town's dark past, found himself stranded in Blackwood on a cold October night. His car had broken down on the desolate road just outside the village. With no other choice, he ventured toward the eerie glow of the village lights. Tom's journey had brought him to this forgotten village, where time itself seemed to stand still. He had heard whispers about a cursed church, but thought them to be nothing more than local folklore. As he approached the village's only inn, the innkeeper's eyes widened at the sight of him.
"You shouldn't be out at this hour. Blackwood is not a place for strangers after dark, especially not near the church."
Tom, exhausted and cold, scoffed at the warning. A church? How dangerous can a church be?
But the innkeeper's face turned pale. He leaned closer and whispered in a trembling voice, "It's not the church, son. It's what lurks inside." Ignoring the innkeeper's ominous words, Tom made his way to the church, seeking shelter from the biting cold. The village itself felt abandoned, its windows shuttered, and its streets empty. The only sound was the wind, howling like a lost soul. The towering spire of St. Alden's loomed over the village like a ghostly sentinel, its once grand facade now cracked and worn. Tom hesitated at the foot of the church steps, a shiver running down his spine.
The heavy wooden doors creaked open as he pushed them, revealing the dimly lit interior. The candles that lined the walls flickered weakly, casting long shadows that danced across the stone floor. The air inside was thick with dust, and a chill settled into Tom's bones. He stepped inside, the door groaning shut behind him, sealing him inside the forgotten chapel.
Tom's footsteps echoed in the silence as he wandered down the nave, his breath visible in the freezing air. The ancient wooden pews were empty, save for a few scattered prayer books left abandoned by the congregation that had once filled the church. Despite the solitude, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As Tom reached the altar, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet further. His fingers trembled as he ran them across the cold stone. Suddenly, a faint whisper broke the silence.
"Leave it, and now!"
Tom spun around, his heart racing, but there was no one there. The voice had been soft, almost fragile, but unmistakably real. He glanced around the room, his pulse quickening as shadows seemed to shift at the edges of his vision. A sense of dread settled over him like a heavy fog. He had heard the stories, the curse of St. Alden's, the church where souls were said to be trapped for eternity. Before he could move, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, slow and deliberate. Tom's breath hitched in his throat as he spotted a figure standing at the far end of the church, a woman dressed in an old, tattered gown. Her face was obscured by the veil of shadows, but there was no mistaking the cold, hollow stare directed straight at him. Tom backed away slowly, but the woman did not move. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed toward the rear of the church, where a door stood ajar, leading to the crypts below.
"Who are you?" he called out, his voice trembling. The woman did not answer. Instead, she slowly faded into the darkness.
Against his better judgment, Tom found himself drawn to the crypts. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, revealing a narrow stone staircase that spiraled downward into the earth. The air grew colder with every step he took, the darkness closing in around him. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he descended into the bowels of the church. The crypts below had not been touched by human hands in centuries, their secrets buried along with the souls of the dead. At the bottom of the stairs, Tom found himself in a vast underground chamber, lined with tombs and ancient burial relics. The air was damp and musty, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls. But as he ventured deeper, Tom realized that he was not alone. A low moan echoed through the chamber, followed by the soft shuffle of feet. Tom's eyes darted around, and to his horror, he saw them figures emerging from the shadows. They were skeletal, their faces twisted in eternal torment, their bony hands reaching out toward him. The cursed souls of St. Alden's had awoken. Tom backed away, his heart racing, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. The spirits moved closer, their hollow eyes fixed on him with an intensity that chilled him to the core.
"What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible.
One of the spirits, a young girl with empty eyes and a sorrowful expression, stepped forward.
You cannot leave. You belong to the church now, just like us.
Panicked, Tom tried to flee, but the door at the top of the staircase slammed shut with a deafening thud. The spirits circled him, their voices rising in a haunting chorus of whispers.
There was no escape. The curse of St. Alden's had claimed another victim.
Tom's vision blurred as he stumbled toward the center of the crypt, where an old, weathered altar stood. Carved into the stone were ancient runes, barely legible in the dim light. As Tom reached out to touch them, the spirits recoiled, their moans growing louder. The runes were a key way to break the curse, but only if completed. Frantically, Tom searched for a way to finish the ritual that Father Alden had started centuries ago. He found a tattered scroll hidden behind the altar, the ink barely legible. The scroll contained the final incantation needed to banish the cursed souls from the church. But as Tom began to recite the words, something dark and malevolent stirred. A cold wind swept through the crypt, extinguishing the candles. The spirits howled in agony as they were pulled toward the walls of the chamber, their forms flickering like dying embers. For a moment, it seemed that the curse had been broken, but Tom was wrong.
The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the stone walls groaned as cracks began to spread across the crypt. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a woman, dressed in black, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light.
You cannot free them, she hissed. The curse is eternal, and so is your fate.
Tom froze as the woman approached, her presence suffocating the air around him. He recognized her from the old paintings that hung in the church's hall. She was Elizabeth Ravenscroft, a witch who had been condemned to death centuries ago for her dark practices. Legend had it that she had cursed the church with her dying breath.
You think you can break my curse? She mocked, her voice a cold whisper. Foolish mortal, this church belongs to me. It will claim you, as it has claimed countless others.
Tom's heart pounded in his chest as Elizabeth's cold hand reached out, pressing against his chest. He could feel the life draining from him, the darkness consuming his soul. Tom knew then that there was no escape. The curse of St. Alden's had bound him, body and soul, to the church for all eternity. As his vision faded, Tom's last thought was of the warning he had ignored, the innkeeper's words echoing in his mind.
You shouldn't have gone near the church. No one ever leaves St. Alden's alive.
The next morning, the villagers found the doors of St. Alden's wide open. Inside, they discovered Tom's lifeless body lying on the cold stone floor. His eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of sheer terror. The cursed souls had claimed another victim. The villagers buried Tom in the churchyard, as was tradition. But they knew, deep down, that his soul would never rest. St. Alden's would forever remain a prison for the damned. The church stands tall against the gray sky. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying with it the faint cries of the trapped souls. The Curse of St. Alden's continues to this day, waiting for the next unwitting traveler to step inside its doors. And when they do, the spirits will be waiting.